Hi, this is Johanna with Agents of Helm, and I know it's been a little while, but I'm here with my review of The Red Queen. Things got a little busy there, but I'm back. Um, you guys might have listened to my review of The White Queen, and if you didn't, you might want to go take a listen. Uh, Spoiler alert, I didn't like it. I came into Red Queen thinking I wouldn't like it, but prognosis was okay. I mean, it's like you're gonna live, but you're not gonna feel all the way there. Anyway, Red Queen is about Margaret Beaufort, the other Henry VIII grandmother. And she's on kind of the other side, and she's very loyal to the Lancasters, which were the royal line that was fighting the whatever side Elizabeth Woodville was on. I try to not to think about her. I try to not to think about her. um, Margaret Beaufort, and just it's about her life. And what's more interesting about this book, as opposed to Elizabeth Woodville's book, White Queen, is that shit happens to her. She gets married at 12, she has a kid at 14, and then subsequently loses her husband, who was really basically raping her since she was 12. But she has a son, and ever since she was a little girl, she had like this Joan of Arc fantasy, and she feels like it's her mission to put her son on the throne. And that's kind of what drives the book. And that makes it sound like it's not like that's all there is, but it's actually a very interesting story. And the way I'm going to talk about my positive points is by pointing out the points that people on Goodreads thought of as negative, because I feel like I have a counterbalance to all of them. First off, she's too ambitious. Elizabeth Woodville is just as ambitious. In fact, at one point, her daughter calls her out and she's like, "You're not going to be happy till all of us die before you get on the throne." Think literally. Paraphrasing a little. Super ambitious, just as ambitious. Margaret Beaufort is, maybe she's, the only difference is she didn't marry for love. That's the only thing I can think of, other than the fact that Elizabeth Woodville is described as being the most beautiful person, most beautiful woman in England, which, yes, she was considered that at the time. If you look at pictures, you're like, why? You'd be like, why? And I'd have to say that the shaved hairline was very popular at the time, and not everybody's beauty standards are beauty standards. Anyway, most beautiful woman in England. Margaret Beaufort, I don't know if she was ugly. The only pictures you can find of her on Google are of her wearing like a wimple and looking like this. Not really, and when she was like 60 years old, and that's not really a good way to judge. But she describes herself as being plain and not as pretty. So I wonder if that is one reason why people don't like her, because she's not pretty. So all you're left with is this ambition. But I found her extremely interesting. That was one. There's no romance, which, okay, there's much less romance. For example, the second husband she marries, really nice guy, but she's not exactly getting all tingly for him, especially since she considers him a coward. Every time that her people, the Lancasters, kind of call out, the former king calls out for people to go and fight for him, he's kind of like, no. And that would basically be me. That would be me. I guess I'm not very ambitious. But she's like, "You're a coward, blah, blah, blah." So I think that's why she's kind of about him. But he's very kind to her. She sees it as like a duty. And because she is, spoiler alert, secretly in love with Jasper Tudor. Jasper Tudor, son's uncle. It's a little bit of a mutual thing. There's a couple of scenes there that are kind of like sexually tense, but there's no getting it on. And maybe that's what people think of as romance, but it's medieval England. Courtly love was the real thing, a real thing. And sometimes courtly love ended up in sexual relations. But a lot of the time it didn't. And Jasper Tudor tells her, like, this is courtly love. Like, I can't marry you. Let it fuck up your kid's life, and you want him to be king of England. And so I feel like that's romantic. Um, I don't remember what the third thing was, but basically things happen. She's a schemer. It's wonderful. Her third husband. It is like this who's afraid of medieval Virginia Woolf situation, except with wit and not physical violence or drinking. But they're very much like at one point, Margaret Beaufort is caught trying to incite a rebellion against the king, the new king, the York king, Elizabeth Woodville's husband. And her husband comes out. He's like, "So, I'm gonna put you under house arrest, and I'm gonna own all your fucking land now." Mic drop. Um, so it's just so interesting. I think that maybe it's not for 16-year-olds, and maybe that's who was on Goodreads talking about how it was boring and not romantic. And I thought it was much more fun than Elizabeth Woodville. Like, I'm gonna put a spell on someone. I'm gonna bring my son back from Brussels, and I'm gonna get the throne, and then the book fucking ends. This book also has a very abrupt ending. The ending is Henry Tudor, and I'll get back to Henry Tudor in a minute. Henry Tudor is about to become king. That's it. Like, he has won the battle. Richard III is dead. These aren't really spoilers. You can find them on Google, and it's history. That's it. So I think Jasper actually sends her a note or something that's like, "Hey," but they don't get together historically. He marries Elizabeth another one of Elizabeth Woodville's kids, because Elizabeth Woodville's daughter is, and that's where you get to the boring part. When Margaret Beaufort is under house arrest, she it's like time passes by really quickly. It's the same thing, like you're waiting for this dramatic meeting between Elizabeth Woodville and Margaret Beaufort. Does not happen. They meet for a second. She becomes her lady, Elizabeth Woodville's lady in waiting. 10 years later, we were faithful courtiers. Show me the receipts, Philippa Gregory. Show me them. Anyway, she's under house arrest. Same thing with what happened with Elizabeth Woodville in The White Queen. It's boring because they're not involved. And why couldn't you fast forward to that? And not, is Philippa Gregory afraid of writing like court scenes? Which I've never had that impression, and I've read a lot of her books. Time of shame, I've read a lot of her books. So, which brings me to the interesting part. Does it? Yes. She can't write court scenes, but she is killing it in the military scene department. And the war scene, battle scene department. I mean, I mentioned the same thing in my previous review, but she done good. They're riveting, and the characterization, she writes men. She writes men, but I think she kind of doesn't want to or is not being paid to. But Henry Tudor, I'd love to see her write a book about Henry Tudor, Henry VII. I would love it. Or Jasper, or even Richard, any of those dudes. Any of those dudes. Because the characterization is wonderful. All she has is a chapter to do it, and it's the description of the battle, the description of the scenes. She starts bringing up military fucking tactics. Like, she actually studied this, which shows that it shows her work. You know, she has researched deeply. But I understand that there's more about the men than write about the men. You know, or else make something up for the women. You know, give Margaret Beaufort like a sassy, like, you know, maid of whatever who's like, you better leave that man. It's not going to happen though. So, in conclusion, should you read this book? Yes. If you're into historical fiction, I think you're going to like this one. If you're into historical romance, not so much. It's in there, but it's not a huge part of it. So, read it. I don't know what I'm reading next. I have a book club book that is very depressing, and that I don't even know I'm gonna finish by tomorrow. Okay, I've read like 30 pages. I'm not. And then I have some books on biopiracy and water rights. I don't know exactly if anybody wants me to read those. to review those. But hey, why not? I might. Have any suggestions for something I should read? Leave it in the comments. Go to agentsofhelm.com. That's where we're directing everybody. It's like a stream, and all the fishes are going up in that bitch. All right? Agents of Helm, I'm Johanna. You can also find me at Inky Octopus, INKYOCTOPUS. Peace.